This session we're doing about Bosniak narratives, and we have the pleasure to have Adnan Hasanbegovic, who grew up in Tito's Yugoslavia, finished high school the year the war started, and then fought in the war, is a veteran of the Bosnian War, and then started work with the Center for Nonviolent Action, CNA. We had one of their readings for the prep material, and they have a lot of incredible handbooks and other things online, both in the local language as well as in English. And for a lot of local peacemaking organizations, the Center for Nonviolent Action's handbooks and work, they're kind of like the Bible of peacemaking. I've talked with other organizations and others who are all like, you know, we ask like, well, what materials do you use? Kind of what do you go to? And most often people reference the Center for Nonviolent Action's manuals, which are really incredible and have a wealth of experience that Adnan and others have put into that in their work with veterans and oftentimes people with very extreme narratives, and to really sit down together and do introductory to really kind of deep peace building work and dealing with trauma and bringing those together who were shooting at one another. I had the privilege to sit with Adnan and Amra in a workshop that they were doing with Islamic Relief for some of Islamic Relief's projects that they're doing as they kind of are getting more involved in some peace building work in different parts of the world. And just the wealth of experience he brings because of having been part of the Bosnian War and then working with veterans is deeply impactful. And so I don't know how much in the next hour we're really going to be able to really appreciate the depth of wisdom that Adnan brings, but why don't you take it away, Adnan, and I'm excited to hear everything that you have to share with us.
Okay, like Brian introduced me, I'm Adnan from Sarajevo, peace activist, more than 20 years. And yeah, I was mostly spent that time in its Center for Nonviolent Action, but I'm also active in religious or faith-based peace building, also through the cooperation with Amra and Brian and other people from Small Steps and who we working with. And I'm also a member of the regional peace initiative, Believers for Peace. Drago yesterday mentioned that group. That means that in that group there is a regional ex-Yugoslav groups who are cooperate on that level. How we are like Christians and Muslims can be more active in a peace building. That's been for me, it's most important two aspect of my motivation and also my background and like peace building person is this war veteran identity and Muslim. And also I am the, like Brian said, I was born during the Tito Yugoslavia, and I have also very strong identity connected with Yugoslavia because I spent my good youth period in that sense, and in political sense, I also very identify myself with that period. That's mean that I am strongly, let's say, not just want to be critic among nationalism, but also thinking that national identities, at least on Balkan, probably it's not just here question. It's something what I don't understand so much fixed or stuck in a history. So it's more like I understand that like that can be changed. Maybe because of my experience of this dissolution of Yugoslavia, and when you are reading history of Western Balkan, you will see that it's so much intensive history. Like somebody says that Balkan suffered of overdose of history. But it's true, it's like, for example, here in Bosnia, you have layers of old civilization, not just Roman Empire, I think even before, some old Greek period, antique, and even before that. And that's also influence of the identity over here. I'm mentioning that layers because Bosniak's narrative are complex in the sense that it's not every narrative is complex, of course, but I think Bosniak's narrative is complex because there is no clear one narrative. If you're talking about, for example, today, politics and history or nationalism even, I recognize at least two aspects of. One is a more nationalistic, conservative narratives which are connected with the Islam and Muslims who are active in a faith, who are practicing Muslims, which are mostly connected with Islamic community. And there is more or less secular narrative which are more oriented on historiographic understanding of identity. It means that they are mostly focused on Middle Age Bosnia. But I will come back on that. Bosniak's narratives are can be understood mostly. I will follow the Srđan's way how he explains Serb's narrative, and I will try to refer on that to be symmetric with that. In Yugoslavia period, Bosniaks have different name. They're called the Muslims, and that was the first time that these groups recognized, like politically identity, national identity, like Muslims. It was the name of the group who call themselves today Bosniaks. And yeah, that was the first time that Bosniaks have this level that they can be constitution include people in that period structure of Yugoslavia. And today we have Bosniaks like one of three constitution. What's the word, Brian, when you want to say constituent people?
Constituent people. One of the three constituent peoples of Bosnia.
Yeah. And Bosnia, like the states, today it's understand self like it's made by Croats, Bosniaks, and Serbs together. And that's very important because Bosniaks' narratives have sometimes problem with that, sometimes no. It depends who you ask and which kind of historiography or identity understanding you ask. For example, a lot of Muslims who are devoted to the Islam will said probably that they not just that they insist that we are the Bosniaks our faith is the Islam. But for example, there is other part of Bosniaks who they are agnostic or atheist or maybe Muslims, but they morely trying to develop this new identity, like they understand Bosniaks term like Bosnian, which means that we all, Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks, we are one identity with the three religion. And interesting, during Ottoman Empire, that was the true in context of that period. But right after Austro-Hungarian period, we have these dissolutions of three groups during a romantic period of nations in 19th century. Croats and Bosnian Serbs and Croats becoming more Croats and Serbs connected with the Zagreb and Belgrade. And Bosniak stays alone in that sense, which prefer that Bosnia is the state, is the country, and that identity Bosniaks and Bosnia are very connected. They have this kind of connection like with the state. They took the name of the state to call themselves. Serbs and Croats are tribes historically sense, but Bosniaks connected to the Bosnia. You understand that? Is it clear, Brian, what I talking? Yeah. Yeah. I will set this to just to try to explain. Right after Ottoman leaving the West Balkan in the 19th century, and during that period was happening this distortion and destruction of Ottoman Empire on the West Balkan, or not, or even on all Balkan, but in this case, what in Southeast Europe, after Ottoman Empire leaving, you have even today it's these nation states after. Most of them are Christians. For example, you have Serbs, Bulgarian, Roman, and Greeks, Romanian and Greeks, and all of them are Orthodox, and Croats and Hungarians who are Catholics. Only two Muslims nations who are stay after Ottoman Empire are Bosniaks and Albanians. And today we have Albanians with the three confessions, but Bosniaks are Muslims. And that's the paradox, which I was already mentioned, that after the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, Croats and Serbs become part of the narrative of total Croats and Serbs on Balkan. And Bosniaks are stays like connected with the Bosnia. Today in this one narrative, and yeah, I want to say this, during the Austro-Hungarian period, today Bosniaks said that a lot of them will say today that was not so bad period, even because there was a conflict between Christian and Muslim group, but Austro-Hungarian system was tried to balance, and to even a lot of Bosniaks today have positive opinion about Austro-Hungarian period, and that was the period when even Bosnia, like the political body, becoming live in that sense during that short period of 30 years of Austro-Hungarian period, and Muslims are stay shocked after leaving of these big Muslim empire, but it's a lot of them find a place in Austro-Hungary and to have human rights, at least on religion and identity. But in the spiritual, religious sense, they stay very connected even today with the Istanbul. And in this then trauma period also happening, but during I write over here in my notebook, like Austro-Hungarian period in the Bosniak narrative, not so bad. First Yugoslavia period, bad. NDH, independent state of Croatia, during Hitler and Second World War period, bad mostly. I will explain later why not totally bad. And during SFRJ, Yugoslavia, Tito Yugoslavia, not so bad again, because a lot of Bosniaks today have some kind of nostalgia during Yugoslavia because they get it identity during that period, and there was the period when the Bosnia-Herzegovina get state status in Yugoslavia. That's the reason why you have this most Yugoslav nostalgia and sympathy for even Tito, because of that aspects of his politics. In Yugoslavia, for example, Croats and Serbs have different narrative among them. One symbolically good sentence, or which are explaining who are the Bosniaks. Meša Selimović, famous writer, Bosnian Yugoslav writer who write a couple of very good novel. He says after big sea go, after sea like Ottoman Empire go, we stays here like not big enough to be lake and not small enough to be pond or small water, but something between, and that's mean that Bosniaks after Ottoman Empire left suffered a lot of crimes and let's say ethnic cleaning. For example, in Serbia today, during the Ottoman Empire, you have mostly hundreds of, for example, mosques, and that was after Ottoman leave. There is no one, especially in the north part, in Belgrade and around. Only in the south there was this couple of region where the Muslims, Bosniaks today are majority. Like I said, two main narratives. One is Islamic oriented or Islamic, some of critic during, for example, Ali Izetbegović was lived. A lot of people understand that his politics was not so transparent, that he was in one way Islamist, somewhere behind, but he behaved like Democrat. We don't know today what is the truth. There is a lot of proof that he was Islamist, but there is also proof that he was Democrat. But in a most important part of that Islamic narrative among Bosniaks is that neo-Ottoman, some kind of ideology or Ottoman, the understanding of Ottoman period like romantic period of our golden age. And it's connected with the Muslim identity, at least in Europe and among Turks and Bosniaks and or other Muslim nations in the Balkan, and also there is happening on the Middle East also. And like I said, secular aspect of the Bosniak narrative is that is oriented on a Middle Age period, focus that we are Bosniaks, that's old nation, which are not connected with the even Slavic identity. It's connected with all these identity on the layers which are put here in Bosnia. It's important to understand that all these nations from Croats, Serbs, and Bosniaks are part of Slavic nations, and this understanding of identity today, but that's changing because now, especially these Bosniaks, nationalists, and also not just nationalists, talking that we are not even just Slavic. Of course, that's true, but they putting that narrative, which are older than Slavic identity, are exist in our code, genetic code, let's say. And also there is a picture of, like I said, Bosniaks are suffering of the, even some Bosniak historians said that we suffered 10 or 11 even genocide, which are not so easy to prove, but there is that part of narrative that we're suffering or after the Ottomans left. And that's victim identity are very part, like Sergeant tell in Serb narrative, there is also big victimization in Islamic Bosniak narrative. Yeah, that is something like this Christian-Muslim relation also, but there is also a level of relation among Bosniak Croats and Serbs. Are we enemy? Are we brothers? There is all the time this dilemma. I said mostly that both of that we are in the same historical period. Yeah, Islamic identity is a part of Muslim identity is part of that narrative. It's also influenced on this relation according to Europe and the West. Most of in Bosniak narratives are, at least in last period of after 90s, are that West-oriented, let's say, Bosniaks mostly, but there was and there is today probably some individuals or groups who are not promotion, not that we are not, that our place is not in Europe Union, for example, or in NATO. We are something more to be oriented to the East, to the other Muslim country. But most of Bosniaks, Islamic or secular, are oriented to the Europe narrative, that they understand themselves that they are Europe Muslims or even Europe nations. And these hostile elements among Bosniaks with Serbs and Croats are important to understand that it's also connected very much with the Second World War issue. And it's important to understand war in 90s. Like Srđan said, that genocide against Serbs, which happened in the Second World War, mostly made by Ustasha, fascist group from the independent state of Croatia. They made a genocide against Serbs, and they killed probably about 100,000 civilians, Serbs. And some Bosniaks are part of that Ustasha system, one part of elite, and also some people on the field. And Bosniaks are one part of even political leaders of Bosniaks have this not sympathy, but trying to relativize that position in that period, that the Bosniaks was the divide during the Second World War. You have a part of Bosniaks which become part of Ustasha movement, become just soldiers of some forces which are legal forces of independent Croatia, and not so radical. And there is also Bosniaks partisans and even small part of Chetniks. Also, there was one part of them in that movement of Chetniks during the Second World War. And that's meaning that the first time that Bosniaks become now in the last after war 90s, this is the first time that these Bosniaks get these let's say like the independent country, that they have own country or own state. But I'm repeating these conflicts among them because some of them understand that we Bosniaks are crucial nations, like this, like to say of Bosnia, and Serb Croats are even, some of them say that they are not welcome here, not welcome, but they are foreigners. Especially, mostly they understand them like the traitor, that they don't want to be Bosnians. And that's also influence on that aspect of religion again. And that's secular narrative. It's that we are all Bosnians, it's Croats, Serbs, and Bosnians, and we are connected to the Middle Age Bosnian identity, like King Tvrtko and I don't know, all these the dynasty of Middle Age Bosnia, and it's interesting history, but it's also influence on our narratives. Brian, how I standing with the time is?
I'd love to actually pull it towards kind of the more recent history. We're kind of at the 25-year anniversary, just over, to think about with these kind of this division within the Bosniak community. It's kind of more conservative and tends to be more Islamic, but then also many devout Muslims who then also are part of this more progressive civic society wing that's more about a society for everyone. How does the role for each of those parts, for each of those communities, how does the ethnic cleansing and Srebrenica genocide factor into kind of their dominant narrative?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I was just asking you how much time you think that I have to be finished, and it's have 3-4 minutes, or
Yeah, probably like
it's
another
okay?
5 minutes, max 3-4 minutes, 5 minutes.
Okay. Okay, I start to talk about that. Just genocide is an important part of Bosniak identity, not just Srebrenica, like you said, that all these periods we are suffering from enemies, mostly Serbs, but also others. But genocide in Srebrenica, for them, it's just the end of the, I don't know how to say that in English, like just part of the story, it's
The
something what's
logical
happening here.
conclusion. Yeah, the logical
Yeah,
conclusion of what has already been happening.
yes. And it's true, like we can hear that was happened genocide in Srebrenica also, and also big suffering during these last war of among Bosniaks. But in narrative, the understanding that is something what when we in a peace building understanding these victims, understanding of victims, it's one aspect. Can be victim some nation or individuals who are suffering from the violence or genocide or ethnic cleansing, but also there is role of victim when that victims that become your part of your identity, and that's Sergeant mentioned for Serbs. Bosniaks as well have that victim part of identity. We are in the last war very much suffered much, and also ethnically declining from the Republika Srpska mostly, and this Croat part of Bosnia. But it's also become this that they trying to justify these, especially these war crimes which are made by army of BH or Bosniaks inside of them, that, and also to legitimize this view that Bosnia is our country, that Republika Srpska is not welcome, definitely, but they not in real politics. They understand that should be today, but they're waiting the good time to change that. Then we coming in this danger of new conflict in the future. But for now, it's a status quo about all this 90s period. That's the problem of Dayton Agreement, because these narratives, not just Bosniaks, but all nationalistic narratives, are understanding that period. Dayton Agreement like freezing of the conflict. It's something what stop in the history and maybe will continue sometimes. And a lot of nationalistic conservative understand history even like constant war. Like you said, Brian, what's the influence of that on part of, let's say, in a split in a couple of level of Bosniak's narratives today that you can understand, like I said, secular, but not just that mean that people who are in that part are not Muslims, but they are mostly oriented to these other elements, like Bosnian identity. They want to become part of wider Western civilization values and democratic aspect of state, and to stay in that level. And they also are part of civil society all these years after war. A lot of them are included in different kind of organization and movement, or I don't know, ideas, but all the time there is a big gap between religious people and secular people, and that's not mean but just in Islam, but in general in Bosnia we have these divisions. Unfortunately for me, because I'm also a religious person, most of people are nationalists, and that's the interesting aspect, because all of our traditionally monotheistic faiths are not popularized. Nationalism, tribalism, nothing it's interesting that today here in Balkan we have these airlines between religion and nationalism. I just want to add on that aspect that today Bosniaks are still in the process of becoming something. We will see what will happen, but definitely problem of which I understand today, Bosniak nationalism is a hypocrisy, not just in this religion sense. It's also in what I'm talking at home, what I'm talking in the public. It's not just for the Bosniaks, all other groups also have this problem, but I understand problem of Bosniak nationalism. They are not so loud like Serb nationalists. They are, sometimes you can hear some hits, you know, like hate speech or something, but not so publicly or transparently doing it on political sense or any cultural sense. And I understand that nationalism is a problem which are very deeply connected with identity, because it's connected with this history and remembering of our groups are suffering all the time. Even my grandfathers and mothers have these some aspects of hate speech in our families. I remember that when I was a kid in Yugoslavia period. Even that also this hypocrisy happening during Yugoslavia, like Srđan said, that we have during Tito period, nationalism was moved from the mainstream, but he moved in underground, in a house, somewhere in the narratives, in a church, in a mosques, you know, and explode in the 90s and made so much violence. And today we have a problem because of these lot of hard questions, how to deal with this reconciliation problem among groups, because there is no enough transparent dialogue about 90s, what we have it. All groups are defending self or attacking others. There is just part of society who are trying to include them all in dialogue, in sense. Especially we have, like I repeating myself now, gap between these religious people and secular people, how to understand the future of the nations or what is mainstream politics of that.
Well, that's a good, I
yeah.
think, point for us to, because I think we'd love to talk more about then perhaps already with Srđan's talk, some different questions were coming up about, well, how do we move forward? How do we get out of this cycle? So let's maybe leave it there and get some questions, and then we'll kind of come back and discuss then with you, and you'll be part of one of the groups in just a little bit here. Sound good? All right. I'm going to open up all the rooms, and then we'll come back in maybe like 10, 12 minutes or so. All right, so basically our group was kind of asking where is the momentum headed in terms of growing kind of Arab influence or momentum sort of orienting Islam towards the Arab world or more towards Europe? And also, how does the Bosnian Islamic community see itself as sort of offering something, as sort of not just being influenced by either sort of pro-European perspectives or by the Arab world, but how does the Bosnian Islamic community perhaps see itself exerting itself to say, we have a valid European Islamic perspective here that it wants to influence other Islamic communities with? So kind of where's the influence headed in which directions? Is that a good way to articulate, Martin, Samia? Anything to add to that?
Okay.
I think that captures it.
Okay. If I understand momentum of Arab influence that was happening during the war, And right after, mostly not just Arabs, also Iran. It was some kind of, especially during the war, helping in supplies and weapon. And also there was some Islamistic, practically Mujahideen groups which came here, foreigners who are fight on the side of army of BH, and they bring here these strong radical, even not nationalistic but Islamistic Salafi movement, which are become very popular over here. But all these years afterward, 25 years afterward, they have a lack of influence. More and more are not disappearing, but are becoming marginalized. And that's good. There was some good political move of Islamic community. According that, they are find a way how to deal with that. And today, that's not something which are so much influenced on the mainstream Islamic community groups among Bosniaks. Yeah, like some influence by others. That's the problem of the not just Bosniaks. Because of all this history experience, there is all the time these big empire aspects and this small nation problem of understanding that they are all the time on some big brother back, like that was Ottoman Empire or today NATO Pact or Russia. All the time you have these where we are. And among Bosniaks today, I think, in my opinion, that mainstream is a pro-Europe politically oriented, and even like this is how much authentic our values are compatible, not our, but Bosniaks, Muslim group, or community are understanding themselves like that they are Europe Muslims with the most values are common, like with other nations in Europe. And the only difference between us is the religion. And yeah, I think it's also mainstream today becoming among even nationalist Bosniaks. They are not, at least not publicly or visible aspect, they're not propagating Oriental approach, like that we are part of, I don't know, some Islam civilization. Yeah, they understand that we are, but that's not just on a cultural level or spiritual. There is no political movement which are transparently promoting that part. And that authentic values, Bosniak understand that this is something what is common in all other Europe nations, let's say.
Well, there's a couple groups discussed hypocrisy, and so maybe that'd be a good thing to focus on instead, since our group was, it just seems a couple groups are interested in this topic. So Orhan wrote that, and I think this is kind of articulating what he's meaning related to hypocrisy. How come religious people are nationalists when Islam teaches people to be united, since we all originate from one man and one woman? Is that hypocritical as well? And so then also others chiming in about how Muslims having strong nationalistic tendencies just seems very strange given the universal teachings of the Quran.
Yeah, that's a crucial dilemma for me as well. How that's possible, even that when you read classical Islamic theology or, I don't know, society or social science on everything, especially spirituality, it's obviously that Islam not supporting nationalism in there is no level which I find in traditional Islam that is standing on that side. There is an aspect which can be compatible with patriotism. That's not, and because on Balkan we have this confusion between what is patriotism, which are not nationalism, mean. For example, in the United States, you have multicultural society, and when you send, I noticed that when I discuss with Americans, that they are confused when I say nationalism is the bad, that they said, not so bad, why? That they also have patriotism in the sense of, all American people. Yeah, we can discuss how they understand, but at least in the mainstream. But for us here, it's when you say Bosniak patriots, it's not same Bosnian patriots. And these Serb patriots cannot be Bosnian patriots in a narrative sense. And then Muslims, because of this narrative about and victimized identity, they find that nationalism is the good position for political position for to fight for rights for their nation, and they just promote Islam in that part which are compatible with nationalism. That's obvious in especially in Orthodox and Church, and but also in a Muslim Islamic community, you can find this schizophrenic position that they will promote nationalism even in the mosque, in a spiritual part, but from the other sense that again come back on these universal views. It's depend of individual and how much they are influenced by trauma or how they understand identity of political identity, because also anti-communism bringing even today so much nationalism, because anti-communism are something which is common to all nationalists, not just in the Western Balkans, it's in Eastern Europe at least, even in Russia also. And nationalism and communism are in conflict deeply, and from the Second World War at least mostly. And today you have Bosniak nationalists who are just, it's most important for them, it's even today they're talking about anti-communistic ideology. That's strange, but I said, where you see communism today? But okay, they see it everywhere, it's like something like in US, you have this trauma of communism. I don't know how much you know about that, but I heard a lot of this issue. And this anti-communistic approach is very problematic even in Europe today, but that's other topic. I think
that's great. I feel like I'd have a lot of follow-up questions. That is, I'm sure a lot of people would. There's a lot we could drill down into here. But Yusuf has a question, and so I would love for him to be able to jump on and he can ask you directly.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to apologize for not having my video on. My kids are in online class, and I don't want to use up the bandwidth. And I want to say Assalamu alaikum to all the Muslims who are here, and peace to everyone else who is here. And it's more of a statement. When the narrative was given about our Bosnian brothers and sisters, that they're moving towards nationalism and the problems and the hypocrisy with nationalism, it reminded me of the plight of the African American here in this country, from experiencing hundreds of years of anti-Blackness. The African American moved to anti-whiteness, so sort of a Black nationalist movement, and it was really fertile because of the pain that was caused from the prior event of white supremacy. So I understand it in that way of self-defense, people moving that way, but they should understand that it comes with some baggage when you move in that direction. I mean, there's a way to be self-intuned and self-involved without going as far as nationalism. For example, I mean, I'm not a nationalist at all, Black nationalist, but at the same time, I am against Eurocentrism, which is a positive thing, more Afrocentrist in that way. No European fathers of history, no European fathers of science and things like that. You know what I mean? So there are ways to express that without going as far as to imitate the oppression that someone has inflicted upon you, or the potential of being that oppressor.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Yusuf. And it even brings up so many more questions, because it's related even back to the question of sort of this Arab orientation versus European orientation, and so many other things, when it's like, really, where is power centered, and how much are we oriented sort of in pursuit of power, and what does that really mean? Sort of, what are we replicating? Does anyone have sort of a follow-up final question? I feel
Brian,
like,
I think there are some questions you didn't read about Islamic community and other things in chat. Very interesting comments and questions.
I might have missed them. Do you want to read any of them out, Amra?
Yes. Bosnian Islamic community is an institutional religious organization. It is very much church-like, that Muslims calling the Islamic community as a church find offending. And also, Adnan, can you write somewhere? That's the first thing. I will read the second thing. So the first thing about that, Islamic community versus church. And then idea of nation came to Balkan in half of 19th century. This idea occupied more Serbs and Croats during the last day of Ottoman Empire. I think that Muslim nationalism born like reaction on Serbs and Croats, and because of fear and confusion which started after Ottoman Empire was broken. That was more comment, but maybe Adnan would like to comment. Thank you.
I just want to understand this question about Islamic community.
Yeah, I'd understood it as well. It was more of a...
It was just a brief remark to our friends from United States, what Islamic community is, actually. So
yeah. Okay. Sorry, I didn't.
No, it was not a question, but I also wanted to mention that when you say to members of Islamic community here that organization is a church, it is offending, but which is as far as I can understand, it's wrong. So
I think it's very important. I'm sorry for interrupting, but Adnan, I would like also that you explain or comment a little bit on that rule of Islamic community for the Bosniak identity, and really that confusion which Orhan underlined very well, which actually American people who are totally indifferent, they saw that institutional thing inside of Islamic community, how it is connected with the Bosnian identity.
Mogu li ja?
Evo ja ću, ok, možeš i ti, samo da ja, što sam već krenuo da kažem, pa se ti nadopuni ako može. Jel ok to?
Okay.
So Adnan's going to answer, and then Ernada's going to go ahead and finish up then.
When I mentioned Islamic community and what is, for at least today, society in Bosnia, Islamic community is like the church. Yeah, it's like organized Islamic Muslims in Bosnia organization which are leading all these faith life or religious life among Muslims over here, and that Bosnian Islamic community appearing during Austro-Hungarian period, when the Muslims lose these connections with the Sultanate in Istanbul, and that was the central role in Islamic identity, was the Sultan and Islamic like hierarchy over there. But when Bosniak stays here and the Ottoman Empire left, Austro-Hungary helped to organize Muslims through the Islamic community, and then stays after that period. All these years after, Islamic community is the only constance of the identity among Bosniaks. It's Islamic community is very connected with even political identity, because most of this national identity today is very connected with these like groups who call themselves like young Muslims, which are very not so much oriented on Islamism, but that was the part of the, for example, Ali Izetbegović, leader of Bosniaks during the war and after, and yeah, and he was the member of the young Muslims, and they are very connected with Islamic community. But yeah, they are like a church today. By the way, they are very influenced on this main party, political party, Social Democrat Party for Democratic Action, as they are.
Renata, did you want to jump in then?
Yes, I wanted to say that when Ottoman left from Bosnia, that we had situation that Muslim didn't have here authority, and Austro-Hungarian Empire insist that Khalif, who was central figure, gave the Muslim legal paper document. We call this Menshura, that Muslims here in Bosnia can organize by themselves. And that was, in that way was born Islamic community in Bosnia. And all last 100 years and more, they are developed their institution who continue some traditions of Ottoman Empire, like schools, etc. But problem came when communists ruled, and also when first Yugoslavia ruled, because they took some foundation of Islamic community, and this foundation couldn't work. That was problem because they didn't have money, financial, how can I say, financial resources, okay? And that Muslims feel that this attacked their identity. In communism become worse, because communists also took some very important places in Sarajevo and buildings who were in Islamic community heritage. And on the beginning war, this nationalistic party, like they are promised to these religious communities, not only Muslims, also Orthodox and Catholics, they are promised that they will back some of this heritage, who are occupied by all these periods, communist, etc. Okay, did you understand what I said? And this first Muslim Democrat Party, they are developed in, how can I say, in collaboration with Islamic community in Bosnia, and also that was some similar in other groups, religious here. They wanted freedom for religion because communists stopped this feeling. They wanted more freedom, and they didn't expect that this like nationalism can lead to the war and these victims and these horrible things who did after.
Thank you so much, Renata. That was great. There's also, if you look back at even a little bit further, it's fascinating to see as the Islamic community developed that there was a lot of internal theologizing happening in terms of, can Muslims live under a Christian empire? Can Muslims fight for a Christian empire? Because Muslims also fought on the side of the Austro-Hungarians. And so a lot of these earliest kind of Muslim re-theologizing in a European context, what does it look like for Muslims to live in a non-Muslim land, were happening in Bosnia. So there's an article from the Atlantic I can paste in the chat, which of course, you know, is has a pretty it's promoting the fact that Bosnia can be a model for a liberal European Islam. So of course, there's a lot of assumptions embedded in there about what the author wants to see, but it's fascinating to think about kind of the unique history that Bosnia has and its Islamic community.
May I say something?
Yes.
Yes.
May I? Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, just a short, I want to say, I just want to add something what actually Ernada and Adnan said. It was like a hardship in which stuck the Islamic community, the Islamic intellect people, the ulema, we call it ulema in that time, the Bosniak, not just explicitly in Bosnia. It wasn't like that. It was like in whole region, it was really like, let's say better, a dilemma, how they will fight in a new, after the Ottoman Empire left, after the Ottoman left and lost, how they will fight, how they will build an Islamic community, actually institution. And it was on the beginning like organization, and they did like it step by step during that time on the beginning with Austro-Hungarian. I just want to mention it. It was like really lots of dilemmas, how they will fight, how they will how they will organize it. Does Muslim could allow the new, how actually, how they lost themselves. But I must say that actually the Bosniak, not Bosnian, the Bosniaks ulema fight on well and organize it as well. And they for sure, they couldn't keep in Islam like in Saudi Arabia, but they deal on nice way. And the most important that we kept the Islam on this area until today. So that's just like with a good connection with new empire, Austro-Hungarian, and yeah, that's just short my thank you.
I can say, yeah, thank you on all these adding what have it by others, and especially Sister and Ernada what said. I want just to reflect on this question about reaction on the Bosniak nationalism in reaction on Serb and Croat nationalism. It's always connected that all nationalism keep each other on the level of they understand. I understand that nationalists from one group and to another group, they have this common interaction, and without other nationalism, probably these ones stay empty without enemy. In historian way, but also identity way. And it's always important for national narrative, they have enemies. Somebody is a danger. And who is danger, that's depend of the political straightening or orientation of that nationalistic group. Like I said, here we have experience of left nationalism and right nationalism. I sense that there is secular or even socialistic nationalism, which are connected with the Nazi party or national socialism. But you also have this clerical nationalism, which are connected with religion. And that's interesting for me, that for understanding and important for understanding of nationalism, everywhere is different. But there is some aspect of ideology which are always the same, that nationalism need enemy. And in that sense, of course, Bosniak's nationalism is a very even constitutionalized on this level of conflict with the Serb and Croat nationalism, because they have different narrative, of course, but they also have this is the needs of defending, to like this brother from USA, black nationalist in US. It's the same here. When you are in a position of minority somewhere, your nationalism is always look like not so bad. And even all of us, even today, with the human rights, aspect of it. We will show sympathy for the minority nationalism, but will be more critical to the majority group nationalism. And that's the paradox, that Bosniaks are majority in Bosnia, and that everybody expects from them that they behavior like they are majority, but in a regional sense they are classical minority. And that is a position of, because Bosnia is a part of the region, very connected. Serbia, Croatia, and Montenegro are not foreign country in classical sense. It's a very connected to identity and history, and mostly sometimes enemy states, you know, like somebody who attacks.
Thanks, Adnan. That's probably a great spot to wrap it up on. And I think that is kind of the dilemma, as well as kind of these different streams within the Bosniak narrative. There's also this flip that happened from being a minority population to all of a sudden now in the state of Bosnia being, at least having the plurality, or probably just the slight majority of the population. And now kind of the expectations have also shifted, which is part of all these dynamics at play. This is fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. We will look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. And as well, tomorrow in between the meetings, we're going to leave it open so people can have more informal conversations. And we'll look forward to spending more time together. So have a good rest of the day or a good sleep.
Thank you.
Special thanks to Adnan.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you.